right, so now let's get some more details from that event. And we have Gabriel Ologunwa, the AVP, Global Expansion and Payment Partnership, West Africa at Flutter Wave, one of the partners making this PAPSS Cowry platform alive from yesterday. Hi, Gabriel. Good morning and welcome to the program.
Good morning, and thank you very much for having me.
Great. So this is very interesting, and we need to make it work on the continent. We've been hearing of PAPS and easing payment system on the continent. So tell us how this is going to work.
Thank you very much. Like the Secretary General of AFCFTA just said in your report, what has the dollar got to do when two Africans are transacting? And so the objective of PAPSS is to break down the existing barriers that exist for intra-Africa transactions. And so, yes, we are Africans. There are multiple countries on the continent, but because we are one continent, we should be able to interact, with each other as though we were neighbors. And so within 54 countries, over 42 currencies, which each country having their own licensing requirements and trade rules, that is definitely a recipe for trade transaction complications. And so taking away or breaking down these trade barriers is the primary objective of PAPSS, which is simply facilitating instant settlement of transactions, of intra-Africa transactions. That's really what the objective here is.
Okay, so I guess one of the things that dollar has been doing is acting as an equalizer. And I mean, and when I say that, what I mean is, so how do we know the rate of, for instance, a naira to a cedi? If I want to have a transaction with someone in Ghana, and through PAPS, I'm supposed to be able to do it in local currency. How do I know the exchange rate?
So excellent. So this is one of the questions that we've gotten within the industry, right? From customers, from consumers, from participants who are willing to participate within this project. And so there's been the concern that you just raised, what will now be the unifying currency for exchange. And so one of the features that PAPSS is currently building into the system right now is a situation where every treasurer, every country can quote their own rate. So, for example, I want to purchase the Kenyan shillings, right? The treasury at Flutterwave can quote their own rate to say, okay, this is the rate we would like to exchange this currency for. And as long as there is that agreement and alignment, then that can happen. And so it completely eliminates the need to initially source for dollars and then the currency exchange losses that comes with that.
Well, doesn't that sound too subjective, subjective to individual sentiments and perspective? Shouldn't this be something that's more objective and, an equal platform? Because, I mean, what if, some individuals from two countries cannot come to an agreement?
So, again, excellent question. But we are going into the era where the market should dictate the price. And so that, would naturally eliminate problems like artificial scarcity and the correspondent complications. And so if the market is able to dictate the price, eventually, it's just a matter of time, right? There will be that uniformity and even that predictability. Now, the concerns around sentiments and, making that switch from the current system to the new system, I mean, these are realities that we have to deal with when switching from an existing system to a new system. But by the time we weigh the pros and cons, we realize that the benefits of switching to, interacting with ourselves and being able to quote your own price, and then of course the entire market is quoting their price, real-time price quotes. It's just a matter of time, like I said, and the market, the entire market, and that sentiment would go away, and everybody would come to terms with the new reality.
All right. Well, I mean, certainly to be a good thing for Africa to trade among itself without the interruption from the dollar. That will obviously be a good thing. But let's also look at how it's going to work. So I'm supposed to be able to, I'm in Nigeria, and assuming you are in Kenya, I walk into my bank in Nigeria after I have gotten my Cowry, my PAPSS Cowry card, and I'm able to interact or transact, with you in Kenya. Paint the picture for us how it could work or how it should work.
Excellent. So PAPSS works as an integrated, unified marketplace, connecting every player within the ecosystem. So if a customer walks into Bank A, right, with the intention to transfer, say, 10,000 naira to um, a friend or a relative in Ghana, right, say for the purpose of example, say 5,000 CDs. Now, that transaction is done on the PAPSS platform. And so what then really happens is the customer in the Nigerian bank is simply debited. Now, remember, the Nigerian bank and every bank, like I said, onboarded on the system. And so you are seeing that this transaction is to be credited to the beneficiary bank. Let's say a First Atlantic Bank in Ghana. So the position of the Nigerian bank is debited, and then the position of the Ghanaian bank is credited. And all of this is happening real time. Similarly, the way you have it with NIBS in Nigeria today. So just debit the position of the Nigerian bank and then credit the position of the Ghanaian banks for final credit to the beneficiary in Ghana. So it is that similar, that simple, and that straightforward.
And all of this is done in local currency of both countries.
Exactly, local currency, because on that platform, the exchange rate is already clearly stated, again, real time between those two currencies.
Okay, so the individual goes into the bank and gets the agreed exchange rate in the bank, just the way you get into a bank and you find, what the value of the dollar to the naira is.
Exactly. So that rate is quoted to the customer in Nigeria, and then depending on what value you want the beneficiary to get, the naira equivalent is communicated to the Nigerian customer and then, debited for that amount.
Okay, so I mean, looking at the logistics involved in all of this, we know what we've had to go through here in Nigeria to do our e-commerce, our transactions, our transfer, and even up till now, we still have some stories around that. What assurance can individuals have that, I mean, I'm not going to hear a story at the end of the day. The guy back there is not saying, oh, I've not gotten it. Meanwhile, I have already been debited from here.
Now, excellent question again. So, because every participant is a player, within the ecosystem, that is the banks, the fintechs, the regulators as well. Now, within the ecosystem, so if I'm approaching my bank, for example, the bank I'm working with, right, is my representative, my correspondent bank in that transactions, and will effectively represent my interest in that value chain, transaction chain. Likewise, if it is a fintech that you are working with or that you are initiating your transaction from, so whether it's a Flutterwave wallet or whatever kind of wallet it is you are using, Flutterwave is responsible for ensuring that your interest is protected. And then, of course, because we are all participants within that system, it is easy to have this conversation. So whether it's a refund that needs to happen or to trace the transaction and to provide real-time feedback and updates to the customer. So that, should provide the assurance and comfort and confidence that every customer would need.
So I know we're talking about payments now, but in a situation where physical transportation, delivery of commodities are concerned, at what point does that come in?
So can you take the question again, please?
So, I mean, I'm making payments. Perhaps I'm making payments for goods that should be delivered from Kenya to me in Nigeria. At what point do we
Right.
consider that Is it after the payment, before the payment, the logistics of delivery of that physical commodity?
Okay, excellent. So this really depends on the trading terms and conditions between both parties. So you could have an instance where payment needs to happen before shipment is done, or if that level of trust, exists between the partners, then shipment can happen prior to payment or concurrently as payment is happening. Again, remember that transactions on the PAPSS platform is happening instant. So debit and credit is happening instantaneously. So regardless of when both parties, the buyer and the seller, decides or agree for payment to be made, the seller, which is the recipient of the funds now, is guaranteed to get his money, as soon as it is initiated from the payer's side.
Mm. Interesting. So what's the projection now? Flutterwave obviously is a party to making it work. What's the projection? We've already seen an increase in intra-African trade. Thankfully, we hope that is sustained. So what's the trend we're expecting with this launch, and what's the projection?
It is estimated that as at today, about 54 billion transactions happen on the continent. And if you just imagine, how much that will scale if you take away all of the barriers to intra-Africa trade, we expect to see this trade volume to jump by 5x maybe within the next 2 years, 3 years, after this has gone fully live across the 54 countries on the continent, and then maybe 10x to 50x in another 5 to 10 years. So the possibilities here are endless. Some of those things that would even come out of this project, we can't even envisage for now. But as long as that infrastructure is in place and is efficient, then anything is possible. Trust me, anything is possible.
Yeah, we do hope that the individual countries will continue to improve their infrastructure so that everybody can be part of it. But how many countries are currently on this platform?
As at today, we have 16 central banks and about 20 countries, but with over 160 plus commercial banks across the continent onboarded already. And of course, that number is growing on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, and this obviously should drive financial inclusion, because if you do not have an account, a bank account, you cannot be a part of it.
The objective of this project is to really make every African neighbors to each other. So it doesn't matter whether I'm in Nigeria or in Kenya or in South Africa, as long as I'm able to trade with, anybody anywhere seamlessly, instantaneously, it almost feels like I'm making a transfer, making a payment to someone seated beside me. So, and that is the objective. And of course, that would drive inclusion, because this seamless payment now makes it feel like everybody on the continent is a neighbor, is your next door neighbor. And so that definitely would drive
Well,
financial
I'm glad
inclusion.
that there's recognition that, a dispute settlement is already imputed in the scale of
Absolutely.
things. You've already said it's the responsibility of the bank and all of that. Because, knowing that we're going to have teething challenges, that's the reality. So,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Yes,
so,
yes.
I'm glad that you brought that up, and that has also been recognized in the midst of all of this. But thank you so much, Gabriel Ologunwa, AVP Global Expansion and Payment Partnership in West Africa, Flutterwave.
Thank you very much for having me.